The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over our quiet neighborhood. It was a typical evening at first glance, but beneath the surface, an unsettling tension brewed. For years, we residents of Maple Ridge had strived to maintain a peaceful community under the guidance of our Homeowners Association, HOA. That fragile balance was shattered when we discovered that our HOA had taken actions none of us could have foreseen. They had constructed a refugee camp on private property. The shock was palpable. Rumors circulated regarding the decision made behind closed doors, devoid of input from the very people most affected. Many residents, myself included, felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could our own HOA, which was supposed to represent our interests and uphold community standards, encroach upon our land and disrupt our lives? The vacant lot that had once been a source of tranquility transformed overnight into an unregulated refuge for those seeking shelter and support. As I stepped outside to absorb the moment, I saw neighbors gathering in small clusters, their faces marked by confusion and concern. Conversations filled the air, a mix of anger, disbelief, and uncertainty about what this meant for our homes. Some expressed sympathy for those displaced but questioned the appropriateness of the camp existing on private property without any consultation or consent. Amidst the chaos, ideas began to take shape. Individuals from all walks of life joined forces as community outrage grew. We shared stories about our relationships with the land, how it had been a haven for families and children to play, a sanctuary where we felt secure. But now it was marred by fences and encampments that surged forth like an unwelcome tide. Determined not to stand idly by, a plan began to crystallize among us. The thought of being powerless was suffocating. Instead, we envisioned taking back control over our land and ensuring that our voices were heard. Conversations turned from lamenting losses into strategizing how we could block access to the camp. Why not use our trucks as barricades? It seemed daunting but necessary if we were to reclaim what was rightfully ours. From my window overlooking the lot that once epitomized peace to me, I felt an ember ignite within. If we could unite as neighbors against this injustice, perhaps there was still hope for reclaiming our community's spirit amidst adversity. Little did I know this would be just the beginning of a struggle that would forever alter our lives in Maple Ridge. The weight of what had unfolded pressed heavily on my chest. As I stood in my backyard, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting shadows over the now occupied land, I felt a profound sense of loss. This piece of property wasn't just land. It was woven into the fabric of my life. It was where my children learned to ride their bikes, where family barbecues filled the air with laughter and the scent of grilled burgers. Now it felt like a stranger, marred by the presence of a refugee camp that had sprung up without my consent or knowledge. The emotional turmoil was difficult to articulate. I felt anger towards the HOA and an unsettling fear for my family's security. Our neighborhood had always thrived on unity, and this sudden upheaval shattered that illusion. The trust we had placed in our HOA to maintain community standards felt like a betrayal of the highest order. I couldn't help but wonder how they could justify their actions in good conscience, as if they were more concerned with perceived obligations than with respecting our rights as homeowners. Financial implications loomed large as well. Property values are inherently tied to community perception and stability. With an unregulated camp sprouting next door, homeowners faced the terrifying prospect of diminished value and, consequently, financial strain. For many families, including mine, this meant not just an upset in property worth but potential long-term ramifications regarding investment in our homes and planning for the future. As neighbors rallied together in shared frustration, we openly discussed our fears during those tense evenings huddled on porches. What would this mean for our children's safety? Would we need to leave this place we had called home for so long? Each whispered question echoed louder than the last, intensifying our resolve to reclaim what was ours. Driven by a mix of indignation and protectiveness over our homes, I felt compelled to act, not merely out of personal interest but for the collective spirit of our community that had been violated. We needed to show that we wouldn't sit idly by while our lives were disrupted. The stakes were high. It was not just about land but about standing firm against injustice and preserving the very essence of what made Maple Ridge special. As conversations around forming a blockade began to crystallize among us, I could sense a shift in energy, a determination ignited by shared purpose. Our resolve to fight back grew stronger each day as we envisioned restoring both our land and our dignity within the community we cherished. As the sun rose the following day, illuminating the neighborhood with a renewed sense of determination, we convened at the local park, a central point where our community often gathered for celebrations. This time, however, it was different. The atmosphere was charged with urgency and purpose. The refugee camp loomed large in our minds as we assembled, a stark reminder of what we stood to lose if we did not act. Neighbors trickled in, each bringing their own stories of frustration and fear. We formed a circle under the old oak tree, sharing our thoughts and brainstorming potential strategies. It was empowering to see familiar faces transformed by a shared goal, reclaiming our land and restoring the integrity of our neighborhood. The camaraderie that developed during those discussions was palpable. It became clear that together we were stronger than any HOA policy meant to divide us. As ideas flowed, the notion of blocking access to the camp emerged as a focal point. It was bold but necessary. With several residents owning trucks, workhorses that could serve as barricades, we began to sketch out a plan. We would create a line of vehicles to obstruct the entrance, demonstrating our collective resolve to defend our homes against this encroachment. We strategized meticulously, discussing logistics and timing. What hour would work best? How could we ensure all participants were coordinated? Each neighbor brought unique skills. Some had experience in organizing protests, while others were adept at rallying support on social media. Together, we crafted a comprehensive blueprint for our blockade. After solidifying our plan, I felt an exhilarating spark of hope mingled with apprehension. We weren't just reacting to an injustice. We were taking ownership of our situation and asserting our rights as homeowners. The emotional weight that had burdened us began to lift slightly as we focused on actionable steps rather than simply lamenting our losses. The evening before the blockade, tension hung in the air like electricity. As I gathered my family around the dinner table, I could see my children's confusion regarding my preoccupation with this fight. I explained our mission, not just to protect our property but also to stand up for what is right in Maple Ridge. Their eyes lit up with understanding, and I felt reassured knowing they supported this cause. The next morning arrived with an air of defiance among us as we lined up our trucks along the access road leading to the camp. With engines idling and adrenaline coursing through our veins, we exchanged resolute nods amongst ourselves. This was it. United by purpose and driven by love for our community, we were ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead in reclaiming what belonged to us all. As our plans to blockade the refugee camp took shape, we knew that confronting the HOA directly was a necessary step. Before taking any drastic action, we felt it was important to attempt communication, to reach out and express our concerns formally. Perhaps, we thought, they would recognize the gravity of their actions and rectify the situation. With a collective resolve, several representatives from our community scheduled a meeting with HOA leadership. The designated meeting room felt sterile and unwelcoming. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as we took our seats around a long conference table. We were met by a handful of HOA board members, their expressions composed, perhaps even indifferent, despite the urgency of our predicament. Armed with notes detailing our grievances and an assortment of questions about their decision-making process, we began sharing our thoughts. As we presented our case, it became evident that the HOA had already made up its mind. They spoke in vague terms, citing obligations to assist those in need while brushing aside our concerns about property rights and community disruption. Instead of engaging with our appeals, they reiterated their stance. The camp was necessary and would remain regardless of residents' protests. Frustration simmered in the room as we pressed harder, asking why consultation had not been sought before such a significant decision was made. The response was dismissive. It felt as if they regarded us as mere inconveniences rather than homeowners with valid concerns. With each question that went unanswered or met with resistance, the anger within us fueled a growing determination. This was not just about land anymore. It felt personal. The meeting concluded with promises of further discussion and vague assurances that something might change. but we all left feeling disillusioned. Our attempts at amicable resolution had failed spectacularly. This only confirmed what many had suspected, that the HOA stood detached from the realities facing the community. Once outside, words like betrayal and disregard floated among us as neighbors expressed disappointment in what had transpired. It was clear we could no longer rely on the HOA to be the guardians of our interests. They had proven themselves renegades in this unfolding drama. Fueled by indignation from this experience, we turned back to our original plan for a blockade. Our resolve strengthened. Inaction was no longer an option. We would take matters into our own hands and show them that Maple Ridge would not be silenced or bulldozed over. The stakes had risen significantly. Resistance was now inevitable. The day of the blockade finally arrived, and a sense of palpable tension hung in the air as neighbors gathered early in the morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over Maple Ridge, but its beauty felt overshadowed by the urgency of our mission. We parked our trucks strategically along the access road leading to the camp, creating a formidable barrier meant to signal our defiance. As we lined up our vehicles, I could see the determination etched on everyone's faces. Some had brought signs, while others carried banners bearing messages of solidarity. Yet beneath that brave exterior were layers of anxiety and fear. What would happen if the HOA or law enforcement intervened? Would we be met with aggression or intimidation? Those unspoken worries coursed through the group as we exchanged glances filled with both resolve and trepidation. Once positioned, we gathered together in a huddle, hands clasped in unity. A neighbor named Tom raised his voice above the murmurs, reminding us why we were here. This isn't just about land. It's about taking back our community. His words struck a chord, igniting a wave of enthusiasm that swept through us all. We needed to focus on our shared purpose, to reclaim what was rightfully ours and send a clear message that we wouldn't be silenced. The first few hours passed in tense silence as we kept watch over the camp. The sounds of daily life around us, the chirping of birds, laughter from distant children, felt oddly surreal against the backdrop of our protest. Every time a vehicle approached from either side of our blockade, hearts raced as we braced ourselves for confrontation. But each time it turned out to be a passing car or someone simply going about their day. Relief washed over us momentarily. As midday approached, emotions began to ebb and flow. Some neighbors expressed doubt. What if this doesn't work? While others reassured them with stories about standing together during previous neighborhood struggles. United by hope and heavier hearts filled with uncertainty, we took turns sharing personal stories about how long each of us had lived in Maple Ridge and what this community meant to us. Each story reinforced our pledge to protect it at all costs. Just when it seemed that our resolve might wane, a few residents brought refreshments, water bottles and snacks, to keep morale high. It was a small gesture, but one that reminded us of our humanity amid this fight for justice. As laughter broke through tension for a moment, I realized this blockade was not merely an act of defiance. It was an embodiment of community spirit coming alive. With renewed energy, we stood firm against any adversities ahead. No matter how daunting it felt, we were determined to remain united until every ounce of injustice was addressed, and until Maple Ridge could return to being the safe haven it once was. As the blockade continued, a newfound sense of urgency propelled us to consider the legal ramifications of the HOA's actions. It became clear that, while our physical resistance was crucial, we also needed a solid legal strategy to back our claims and stand up against the authority that had betrayed us. We gathered in small groups, brainstorming how to document everything that had transpired and what steps we could take to hold the HOA accountable. Our first priority was to gather evidence of trespassing. Many residents began documenting their property boundaries and compiling photographs that clearly showed the encroachment of the camp onto private land. Armed with cameras and notepads, we ventured out with a renewed sense of purpose, capturing images of fences erected without consent and makeshift shelters that violated community regulations. We also discussed the importance of understanding our rights as homeowners within our community. Several neighbors reached out to local legal experts who specialized in property law and HOA regulations. During an evening meeting at my house, An attorney provided valuable insights into potential violations committed by the HOA. They highlighted issues such as lack of proper consultation with homeowners and failure to adhere to zoning laws. Sparked by this knowledge, we began drafting a formal complaint against the HOA. Each member shared their experiences and concerns, which we meticulously included in our documentation. The act of putting our grievances into writing felt empowering. It transformed our emotional turmoil into a tangible plan for action. In addition to filing complaints, we considered mobilizing broader community support by contacting local media outlets. If we could shine a spotlight on this injustice, perhaps more people would rally behind us, both within Maple Ridge and beyond. The thought of amplifying our voices invigorated us. It was not just about reclaiming our land, but also about raising awareness regarding how HOAs could overstep their boundaries. As discussions progressed, so did our resolve. We aligned ourselves not only against the HOA but also for those displaced individuals living in the camp, many simply seeking refuge from dire circumstances. We recognized that while we needed to fight for our rights, compassion should guide our actions. The days following were filled with a mix of apprehension and anticipation as we prepared to submit our complaint formally. With each passing hour spent gathering evidence and strategizing next steps, I felt a growing sense of unity among us. We were no longer just neighbors but allies in a crucial fight for justice. Little did we know this legal battle would require every ounce of strength and resilience within us. A struggle that would ultimately redefine what it meant to be part of a community dedicated to standing up for its values and rights. As the days turned into weeks, the tension surrounding the blockade escalated significantly. The initial determination that had united our community began to fray under the strain of prolonged confrontation. Residents routinely gathered at the blockade, but the laughter and camaraderie that once filled the air were now replaced with an undercurrent of anxiety and frustration. Each day brought a mix of hope and despair as we awaited a response from the HOA or local authorities, who seemed content to remain indifferent. Our patience began to wear thin when it became clear that the HOA was not going to respond to our legal complaints or our public outcry. Instead, they issued a statement claiming their actions were within their rights and even suggested that we were being unreasonable. This only fueled our anger. I could see it reflected on my neighbors' faces. Those who had once been friends now looked at each other with a shared sense of betrayal. The feeling that we had no allies except each other became more pronounced. One afternoon, during a routine gathering at the blockade, tensions reached a boiling point. A group of HOA representatives arrived, presumably to assess the situation but also to intimidate us. The air crackled with tension as we realized this was not just another meeting. It was a confrontation. As they approached, I could see their smug confidence, which only ignited our outrage further. "Why are you here?" shouted Clara, a resident whose family had lived on this land for generations. Her voice trembled but held a fierce strength that encouraged others to voice their frustrations as well. "You need to acknowledge what you've done." The HOA representatives tried to downplay the situation, insisting that they were only there to ensure safety and compliance with local laws. But their condescension only sparked further outrage among us. "We're here because you've broken trust," I added, stepping forward alongside my neighbors. The confrontation quickly escalated as accusations flew back and forth. Words like bullying, disregard for homeowners, and abuse of power echoed in the air between us. Each side attempted to assert moral high ground while tempers flared, and for a moment it felt like the very essence of our community was hanging in the balance. The police arrived shortly after, adding an air of authority to the scene, but instead of diffusing tension, their presence intensified it. Residents urged them to recognize our rights and intervene on our behalf against the HOA's aggressive behavior. Instead, officers cautioned us about trespassing violations related to the blockade, placing additional pressure on already frayed nerves. With every passing confrontation, we found ourselves ensnared in an emotional tug-of-war, but amidst the chaos, a deeper resolve began forming. We understood that this battle extended beyond reclaiming land. It was about demanding respect and drawing lines against oppression. As tempers cooled at day's end, we could feel something shifting within us. The fight was far from over. In fact, it felt more urgent than ever. We needed to channel this frustration into action, not just for ourselves but for everyone who felt powerless against those in authority. In the aftermath of heightened tensions with the HOA, the residents of Maple Ridge recognized the importance of coming together not just physically at the blockade, but also through broader outreach. We began convening regular meetings in the community center, intending to galvanize collective action and discuss strategies to raise awareness about our plight. Each meeting served as a reminder of the strength we found in each other, and as more voices joined, our resolve deepened. One resident, Sarah, a tech-savvy college student, suggested we harness social media to amplify our message. With her guidance, we created a dedicated Facebook group where residents could share experiences, post updates on our situation, and plan future actions. The group quickly gained traction, attracting not only neighborly support, but also attention from sympathizers outside our community. Photos of our blockade, paired with personal testimonies and calls to action, began circulating on various platforms. Within days, local bloggers and news outlets picked up the story. This newfound visibility brought an influx of messages from people across the country who had faced similar struggles with their own HOAs or local authorities. We learned that we weren't alone in this fight. It was a shared battle that resonated with many. Comments filled our feeds. Supportive words from strangers inspired us to press on. Encouraged by this support, we organized a town hall meeting where residents could bring their families and friends to discuss the impact of the refugee camp and share ideas for mobilizing larger public demonstrations. The library was packed. People stood in the aisles as we exchanged stories of loss and determination. Local businesses offered their spaces for meetings, helping us create a network of allies who believed in our cause. Our collective empowerment blossomed further as we engaged with advocacy groups that specialized in property rights and tenant issues. Representatives from these organizations reached out to offer guidance, sharing resources that could bolster our legal standing against the HOA. They encouraged us to document everything meticulously, from photographs of the camp to accounts of emotional distress experienced by residents. Fueled by this newfound knowledge and community solidarity, we began drafting a petition to present not only to local authorities but also to state representatives. The goal was to garner enough signatures to demand an investigation into the HOA's practices and hold them accountable for their actions. As we delved deeper into organizing and advocating for ourselves, I felt a shift within our community that transcended just this issue. The spirit of resilience ignited hope. We were not merely fighting for our land. We were building a movement grounded in cooperation, empathy, and a commitment to justice. It was a revelation that fortified our mission, to reclaim not just our property but also our dignity as homeowners united against injustice. Just as our efforts seemed to plateau, an unexpected breakthrough occurred during a community meeting in the local library. We had gathered to discuss next steps, fueled by both determination and anxiety, when a woman entered the room, her presence commanding attention. She introduced herself as Emma, a local attorney specializing in property rights and HOA disputes. Emma had heard about our situation through the social media coverage that had gained traction, and she felt compelled to offer her assistance. For many of us, this was a pivotal moment. The prospect of legal expertise felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. As she spoke, I could see the spark of hope igniting in my neighbor's eyes. Emma laid out the potential avenues we could pursue, explaining how we could build a solid case against the HOA for their illegal actions. Your rights as homeowners have been violated, she asserted with confidence. There are laws protecting you from unauthorized use of your property that the HOA has blatantly ignored. It's time to hold them accountable. Her words resonated deeply, stirring up a mixture of relief and renewed determination among us. We spent hours discussing our experiences, sharing evidence we had collected, and listening intently as Emma guided us through the necessary steps to strengthen our case. She highlighted the importance of documenting each instance of trespass and improper conduct by the HOA, encouraging us to compile everything meticulously. With her guidance, we began to understand that our fight was not just emotional. It could also be a legal battle that might change the course of our community's future. The energy in the room shifted palpably. Where fatigue and uncertainty had hung over us like a dark cloud, suddenly there was a bright light illuminating the path forward. Emma's presence galvanized us into action. We formed smaller committees to handle various aspects of our case, researching legal precedents, gathering testimonies from affected residents, and compiling a comprehensive dossier to present to authorities. As weeks turned into days filled with strategy sessions and collaboration, I witnessed our community transform from anxious neighbors into a formidable coalition. Emma's support gave us the clarity we needed. We were not just fighting for our homes, but also for justice against an organization that had disregarded its own members. With each meeting, our resolve solidified further. The narrative shifted from one of despair to one of empowerment. We were no longer simply reacting to the HOA's actions but actively taking control of our narrative. The legal path ahead might be challenging, but now it felt attainable. Together, we set our sights on pursuing justice with newfound vigor, ready to reclaim our land and our dignity as homeowners united against oppression. The day of the final confrontation dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the heavy emotions that filled our hearts as we prepared to dismantle the refugee camp that had intruded upon our land. With Emma's legal backing solidified and a comprehensive plan in place, we gathered outside the camp, a palpable sense of unity and determination coursing through our ranks. This was the moment we had been waiting for, the culmination of our collective struggle. As we approached the camp, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Neighbors exchanged glances filled with resolve, each knowing what this act symbolized: a reclaiming of our rights and a stand against the HOA's overreach. Armed with tools and a shared sense of purpose, we set to work dismantling makeshift structures that had been erected without our consent. The first tent came down easily, its fabric fluttering in the wind like a banner of defiance. With each piece we removed, there was an exhilarating rush among us. We were no longer passive victims. We were active participants in reclaiming our community. Cheers erupted as one neighbor shouted, "This is our land!" The sentiment echoed through the group, reinforcing our commitment to put an end to this injustice. As we continued our work, more residents arrived to lend their support. Families brought refreshments, children held signs proclaiming "Homeowner Rights Matter," and their excitement fueled our momentum. The energy was infectious. Every laugh and shout infused us with a renewed determination to push forward. However, not everyone welcomed our actions. A small group of HOA representatives arrived, visibly shaken by our boldness. They attempted to assert their authority, demanding that we cease dismantling the camp immediately. But this time we stood firm. "You've ignored us long enough," Clara declared, stepping forward as a spokesperson for our group. "We have every right to reclaim what is ours." Our voices rose in unison, drowning out any feeble attempts at intimidation from the HOA. We had come too far to back down now. This was more than just about physical space, it was about dignity and justice. With every structure that fell, we felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of anxiety that had plagued us for so long. Ultimately, as we took down the last remnants of the camp, cheers erupted around us. We hugged one another tightly, tears mingling with laughter as the reality of what we had accomplished began to sink in. In that moment of triumph, it wasn't merely about dismantling a physical structure. It was about dismantling fear and reclaiming our community spirit. We had stood together against an unjust force and emerged victorious, not just for ourselves but for everyone who believed in standing up for what was right. It was a turning point that would forever shape Maple Ridge. We were no longer just homeowners. We were a united force ready to protect our home against any future injustices. In the aftermath of dismantling the camp, Maple Ridge buzzed with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. News of our bold actions spread rapidly, igniting conversations across town and drawing attention from local and even national media. Reporters flocked to our neighborhood, eager to capture the story of everyday residents standing up against their HOA for their rights. Cameras clicked and microphones were thrust into our hands as we shared accounts of our struggle and triumph, painting a vivid picture of community solidarity. While many praised our determination, not everyone viewed our actions favorably. The HOA, shaken by the sudden turn of events, quickly began crafting a narrative to regain their lost authority. They issued press statements condemning us for what they termed vigilante justice, framing their position as one of protecting vulnerable individuals in the camp rather than recognizing their failure to consult residents. Yet, for each negative article that surfaced, multiple stories celebrated our fight for justice, highlighting the resilience of homeowners against an overreaching organization. As discussions about the camp's dismantlement unfolded in various forums, opinions remained divided. Some community members expressed concern for the displaced individuals who had lived in the camp, emphasizing a need to balance compassion with property rights. It sparked heated debates in town meetings, forcing us to confront not just the logistics of the situation but also its ethical implications. We understood that moving forward would require compassion towards all parties involved, including those who found themselves without homes. Amidst this whirlwind of media coverage and community discussions, Emma stepped in once again, offering her legal insight on how best to proceed. She emphasized the need for a comprehensive plan that not only addressed our rights, but also considered those affected by the camp's closure. This perspective helped frame our next steps. We sought partnerships with local charities and organizations that could assist displaced individuals while ensuring they were not left behind in our pursuit of justice. As we collected evidence for further legal action against the HOA, there was a renewed sense of purpose among us. Tensions simmered but transformed into a cohesive effort for deeper systemic change rather than simply dismantling a camp. Grassroots support blossomed. Local businesses began holding fundraisers to help both homeowners and those affected by the camp, exhibiting a strong sense of community spirit. Through it all, we learned valuable lessons about advocacy and responsibility. While we had emerged victorious in reclaiming our land from the HOA's overreach, we recognized that our fight was only beginning. United in purpose, we stood ready to advocate not just for ourselves but for fairness and compassion for all members of our community, determined to ensure that Maple Ridge would thrive as an inclusive and just place for everyone. As the dust settled from our confrontation and dismantling of the camp, the fallout for the HOA became increasingly apparent. In response to the public outcry and media scrutiny surrounding their actions, investigations were launched into the HOA leadership's practices, particularly focusing on allegations of unauthorized land use and failure to consult homeowners before making significant decisions. The clarity of our legal claims, bolstered by Emma's guidance, prompted authorities to take our concerns seriously. Reports emerged detailing how HOA board members had overlooked regulations that required community input for major changes. Officials from local government agencies began scrutinizing not only their decision-making processes but also their financial records. As more evidence came to light, it became clear that leaders within the HOA had engaged in misconduct, prioritizing their interests over the rights of homeowners. The HOA's attempts to spin the narrative quickly unraveled as our community rallied around documented proof of their negligence. Residents compiled testimonies from those affected by the camp's establishment and shared personal stories that illustrated how deeply this issue impacted our lives. This mounting evidence painted a damning picture that could not be dismissed, leading to calls for accountability at every level. As investigations progressed, criminal charges were eventually filed against several key members of the HOA for breaching land use laws. The gravity of their actions culminated in a trial that captured widespread attention both locally and beyond. Many residents attended the proceedings, feeling a mixture of anticipation and vindication as they watched former board members face legal repercussions for their decisions. The courtroom was filled with an air of palpable tension as testimonies were presented. Each piece of evidence showcased how the HOA had violated trust within our community. Witnesses spoke passionately about how these actions had disrupted lives and livelihoods, underscoring the importance of holding accountable those who abuse power. Eventually, following extensive deliberations, several leaders were found guilty. The verdict sent shockwaves through Maple Ridge. Some community members felt a sense of relief while others grappled with mixed emotions regarding justice served versus compassion for those who might have simply mismanaged rather than maliciously intended harm. In light of these developments, discussions about restructuring the HOA took center stage during community meetings. Residents recognized that while accountability was crucial, it was equally important to ensure future governance would reflect transparency and inclusivity. Plans began to emerge for new leadership, a governing body rooted in community values that would prioritize engagement with all homeowners. Ultimately, This chapter marked a turning point not just for those directly involved but for Maple Ridge as a whole. We learned the power of collective action, how united voices can challenge even established authorities, and it reinforced our commitment to protecting our rights while fostering an inclusive environment moving forward. With renewed hope and determination, we embarked on a journey to create a stronger foundation for our community's future, ensuring that we would never again face such injustices without putting up a fight. In the wake of our hard-fought victory, a profound transformation swept through Maple Ridge, reshaping relationships among neighbors and fostering a newfound sense of community resilience. The struggle against the HOA had not only united us in purpose but also revealed the strength that lay within our collective spirit. Conversations once filled with apprehension and distrust shifted to laughter and camaraderie as we gathered together, sharing meals and stories at block parties to celebrate our triumph. As we reflected on the journey, it became clear that this experience had deepened bonds among residents. Those who had been mere acquaintances now stood as friends forged through shared adversity. We organized regular forums where everyone could voice concerns, discuss neighborhood issues, and engage in proactive planning for future challenges. The connection we formed was palpable. There was an unspoken understanding that we would support one another regardless of personal differences. Moreover, our fight for justice extended beyond the boundaries of our own properties. Inspired by Emma's guidance and the legal victories over the HOA, many residents began exploring ways to uplift others in need. Local charities emerged from this solidarity, initiatives aimed at helping displaced individuals alongside ongoing efforts to ensure responsible governance within our community. One Saturday afternoon, we organized a neighborhood cleanup followed by a fundraiser for a local shelter. As families came together, children laughed while adults swapped gardening tips and recipes. The atmosphere buzzed with positivity. It felt like a rejuvenation of our community spirit. We were no longer just defending property rights. We were actively participating in building a better environment for everyone. Reflecting on these developments during our meetings, I often found myself marveling at how far we had come since the initial shock of discovering the refugee camp on our land. Our evolution into an engaged community had sparked discussions about long-term goals, initiatives focusing on sustainability, inclusivity, and transparency in all neighborhood dealings. AS new leadership was established for the HOA with representatives chosen directly by homeowners. We felt empowered knowing that each individual's voice mattered in shaping decisions affecting all of us. A renewed commitment to openness took hold. Regular forums with HOA members ensured that residents stayed informed and involved. Through this journey of struggle, resilience blossomed into something beautiful. A community empowered by mutual respect and collaboration for the greater good. Maple Ridge was no longer just a collection of houses. It was a thriving community bound by shared experiences and collective strength. We grasped that true justice went beyond reclaiming land. It encompassed nurturing relationships that would fortify us against future challenges, while keeping compassion at the forefront of our actions. This experience taught us invaluable lessons about standing together, not only for ourselves but for every member of our community who called Maple Ridge home. As we looked ahead, the experiences of the past months loomed large in our minds, prompting speculation about the future of Maple Ridge and its residents. The successful dismantling of the refugee camp had not only reclaimed our land but also opened up vital conversations surrounding land rights and the role of the HOA in our community. With new leadership emerging and a commitment to transparency, we began envisioning a future where residents would have a stronger voice in decision-making processes. The implications for property rights were profound. As homeowners, we now felt empowered to protect our interests proactively, ensuring that any future developments would involve meaningful consultation with the community. Discussions surrounding updated bylaws took center stage. We aimed to create more robust regulations that clearly delineated what constituted appropriate actions by the HOA. The goal was to foster a culture of collaboration that emphasized accountability and respect for resident input. In addition to policy changes, we recognized the importance of ongoing vigilance against similar injustices that could arise in the future. Our experience had taught us that complacency could lead to exploitation. We committed to establishing a neighborhood watch committee focused on monitoring HOA actions and engaging homeowners in discussions about potential challenges or policy changes well ahead of time. This proactive approach aimed to create a safety net that would protect against any repeat of past mistakes. As we contended with these new dynamics, fostering an inclusive environment remained at the forefront of our minds. We not only wanted sufficient protections for existing residents but also sought ways to integrate support for those who may find themselves marginalized within our neighborhood. Our new initiatives included forming partnerships with local organizations dedicated to assisting vulnerable individuals, ensuring that compassion remained a cornerstone of our community values. Moreover, we embraced educational opportunities by organizing workshops about property rights and governance for homeowners, empowering neighbors with knowledge so they could navigate challenges confidently. The discussions were constructive, filled with insights shared among residents eager to learn from one another's experiences. Looking ahead, it was clear that Maple Ridge had matured into a thriving community fortified by resilience, collective responsibility, and shared values. The fight against the HOA had catalyzed a transformative period of growth. No longer mere individuals living side by side, we had become a cohesive force dedicated to advocating for justice and fairness. Our journey illuminated just how powerful a united front could be, a reminder that every voice matters when it comes to shaping our shared environment. As we continued on this path toward an inclusive and equitable future, each resident felt empowered knowing they were part of something larger than themselves, working together towards a better tomorrow for all inhabitants of Maple Ridge. Together, we resolved to remain vigilant and engaged stewards of our community, a commitment that would transcend challenges and inspire future generations to uphold justice in every aspect of their lives.